Hey everyone, and welcome to the coverage of the chapter 7 of the course. In this particular one, we're going to be jumping into one of the very main lines after the move f3, where black goes for e6, but we're not going to be studying what happens after knight c3 and the move bishop b4, because we're going to be looking on that into the next chapter, but in this particular one, we will have more of an in-depth look on what happens if black tries to deviate. And I know bishop b4 is very popular, but there are actually some other alternatives that black has, and it's very important to be prepared against them as well. So as a quick overview, I would say that the knight f6 move is the most respectable sort of sideline here, avoiding to play bishop b4. But again, I'm not really so sure of how many of the black players would be comfortable of playing this line, because first of all, this allows a direct transposition to the French. I mean, after knight f6, e5, knight to d7, f4, black has to play c5, and then after knight f3, we get a direct transposition to the very main lines of the knight c3 French. And this is not really what I'm recommending against the French in this particular repertoire, so unfortunately we cannot really go for that. I mean, if you're comfortable playing this line, by all means you can go for it, and you don't need to study the additional theory that we have here. But I just wanted to point out that this is something we can play for, and this is one of the main reasons of why I think this could potentially not be played very often by black, because I don't really feel like so many Caro Kann players are comfortable when playing the French defense as well. But this is again not really our problem. We need to be prepared against it anyways, and we will be focusing on the move bishop to e3, which is keeping the independent value of the fantasy variation. No need to go and play the main lines. And yeah, on this particular line, we're going to be looking at the end of the video. And before we go for that, we will also be covering the other moves as well, which are b6 here, b5 is another move, c5 is a move as well. And then we are also going to be looking on what happens if black develops the knight early with knight d7 or knight to e7. And at the end of the video, we're going to be coming back to the more serious knight f6 move. So to start things off, we're going to be beginning with the move b6, which is preparing to play bishop to a6 and just try to get rid of the bad bishop, which might seem very logical, but again, it's not really influencing the center all that much. And white can play bishop e3 and make bishop a6 with bishop takes. And after knight takes, we can develop our knight to h3. As you will see, this is quite a common square for the knight in the fantasy. I would say a little bit similar to the Zamish attack in d4, opening against the King's Indian. When white has this pawn on f3, knight h3 is usually a common move for white. So I would say it's sort of the case here as well. So white plays knight h3. And black has two plans here. One of them is to play knight c7, but then we can just castle. And after knight e7, we can play knight e2, simply rerouting the knight and preparing to play something like c3. And then we can even advance in the center with f4, e5, f4, push with g4. And the final goal would be to break with f5, obviously. So after knight e2, black plays knight g6, but now e5 is very strong. After bishop to e7, we can play c3, solidifying our center. And after castle short, knight f2, bringing the knight into the game. c5. I really like to play g3 here because it's a multi-purpose move. First of all, we are staying flexible, and also we could either push for f4, and also we have h4, h5 idea to kick this g6 knight, because this is a very common theme, as you already know. So after cd4, we can take with a pawn, and after f6, black is trying to create a mess in the center, but we can just play f4 and keep a nice solid center with a very nice position for white. we can continue with something like knight d3 on the next move, and then look forward to play rook c1 and exploit the fact that the c6 square has been weakened early on in the game. So this is small but steady edge for white, and after bishop takes on a6, knight takes, and knight h3, black can also play the move knight to f6, but here we have again the strong e5 attacking the knight, and after knight d7, you have to understand that black is trying to push for c5, and then the goal of this is to weaken our center, our pawn center quite a bit. So it's important to play knight e2 so that we can be ready to meet c5 with c3, and now we are ready to recapture in the center with the pawn and keep everything solid. So now after bishop e7, we can simply castle, and for example, if black goes knight c7, we can go for the ultra aggressive g4, and after castle short, g5 is quite a nice attacking plan here. And after something like knight b8, this is usually a common maneuver for black, trying to get the knight to c6. We can play f4, and after knight c6, knight f2 is a very strong move, preparing to bring the knight to g4, and after cd4, again, we take with a pawn, rook c8, and after knight g4, we are ready to continue our attack with rook f3 to h3, and then bring the queen over the h4 square, and yeah, black is just gonna be having a very hard time defending against our attack. So this is very good for white already. And instead of this knight c7 move, black can also go for the direct short castle. But here we're gonna be going for the same g4. As you can see, this is quite a thematic idea. And after rook c8, it's just very nice to start with a3, making sure that no cd4, knight b4 will be available. And after b5, we can play f4, preparing to push g5, then get like knight f2, knight g4, as we've seen a little bit earlier. If c takes, again, we recapture with a pawn, and after queen b6, we push g5. Black can try to create some kind of play with b4, but we just mind our own business with knight f2, and after pawn takes on a3, we take with a pawn, and rook c4 can be played. But after knight g4, we are having the same plan of going rook f3 to h3, and then lift the queen to the h5 via the e1 square, with a very dangerous attack. In this particular case, black can do something like rook c8 and then knight f8 to defend, but keep in mind that then we will have all kinds of knight f6 ideas, which is going to be opening up the black king, and white has very interesting attacking play. So I think this should be already more than enough against this b6 move. I don't really think that this is very popular, but I've noticed that it gets played sometimes in the online games. So even a little bit more popular would be to play b5 here, and this is a little bit more aggressive, I think, and this is why more people would be attracted to this move. But it's also risky from a strategical point of view, because it's weakening black's position quite a bit, especially the c5 square in this concrete case. But it's not really, it's not like we're going to get the knight there immediately. But, from a long-term perspective, this could be something that's affecting the game. So after b5, I really like to go for the prophylactic move with a3. And black has a choice between going for the direct b4 or playing a5 first. If a5, I really like to suggest this pawn sacrifice with bishop to d3. And the main idea is that if black takes on e4, we're going to be taking with the f pawn. And after queen takes knight f3, we're getting really nice piece play. As for example, after queen b6, we have this super strong e5 move, keeping this bishop locked on c8. And now we also have knight e4 ideas. And I think we can already stop by now and say that white has enough compensation, but we can still look through some of the lines here to see how the play could go. After knight e7, queen e2 is one of the key ideas, preparing to play bishop e3, developing with tempo, and after knight d5, knight g5 is very strong now, keeping an eye on the f7 pawn, also directly attacking the h7 pawn. So if h6, for example, we can take on d5, and after pawn takes, we have this super strong bishop e3 move with a cute tactic, because if black plays d4, we can take on f7 intermezzo, and after king takes, king go queen f2, king has to move, and after bishop takes on d4, white is completely winning because black has to move the queen, while we are also threatening to play bishop g6. We can castle long as well to introduce the rook into the attack, and white is completely winning here. So instead, after bishop e3, it would be a little bit better to play queen c7, but white still has a very strong queen h5 move, threatening to take on f7, and then if queen takes, we will be winning the queen with bishop to g6. So black has to take on g5, giving up the exchange, but after queen takes, queen e5, we can just hide with the king on g1, and with h4 next. White has a very nice position being up the exchange. We also have rook f1 ideas, and white is simply already clearly better. So instead of accepting the pawn sacrifice, black would also ignore it and play bishop to a6. But here's the thing, we're going to be going for this very nice rerouting move, which is knight c to e2, preparing to solidify our center with c3. And black has two moves here, b4 or c5. If c5, we're going to be protecting our center with c3, as I said. And after knight c6, we're going to be developing the bishop to e3. And after queen b6, we have a very strong sequence here with e takes on d5, followed by knight h3, preparing to bring the knight to over the f4 square. And after bishop d6, we can castle short with knight f4 on the next move, with a very nice edge. Due to the small lead in development that white has. So instead of going c5, b4 is also a move for black to try to trade off the bad bishop, let's say. And after pawn takes on b4, black takes with the bishop, and now we get to kick the enemy bishop with c3. And after bishop e7, knight h3, preparing short castle, knight f6. Again, whenever we can play e5 and gain a tempo is usually a good idea. After knight to d7, f4, g6, we can take on a6. And after rook takes, we can castle. The idea is to just eventually push g4 and break with f5. And for example, if black goes for queen b6, we can just play this useful king h1 move, sidestepping the diagonal. And after c5, we can play g4. And we're ready to push f5 on the next move with a nice edge. And if black goes for short castle, we can play g4, and yeah, we're ready to push f5 next. White has a very nice initiative. So that should be it about the a5 move. Now let's move on to the direct b4. Here we are obviously going to take, and then play the move bishop to d2. And this is a really nice move from a strategical point of view, because we are planning to play knight a4 in the next move. And we're just saying that, well, we have a weak pawn on the a file that we can play for in the long run. The line is far more complex than that, but still, that is a very nice asset to have. So, for example, now, if black plays knight f7, knight to f6, we're going to be kicking it with e5, and after knight d7, we're playing f4. Now we're getting our knight to the natural square. And after castles, knight f3, we're simply having an improved version of the French defense. We can play bishop d3 directly, threatening bishop h7 kind of stuff, and then also read out the knight to e2 with a very nice position for white. So knight e7 would be a little bit better for black, but here we're going to be continuing with this idea that I mentioned, knight a4, and after bishop takes, queen takes, castle short. We're going to be playing knight h3 because we're not able, like in the previous line, to get this e5 with tempo and then f4. But we're fine simply by developing the knight. Then usually the knight could go to f2, from where it's protecting the center nicely. And here, black's plans are connected with e5, otherwise white has a free edge. So black can go e5 immediately, opening up the bishop, threatening bishop takes on h3, and trying to create a mess in the center. But here we can just play the knight f2 move, and for example, after d takes on e4, we have a very strong intermezzo, taking on e5, and if black goes for the endgame, we're simply winning, because after pawn takes on f3, we have this nice tactical trick with knight b6, and white is winning the exchange because of the pin. And if black goes e3, we can just take it with a queen, and after knight d5, we can just sidestep it with queen d2, meet knight d7. With f4, black still can try to open things up with f6, but then we have this super strong e6 move, with the idea that after queen e7, we are able to defend the pawn with f5, and after knight e5, we can play bishop e2. And white is just very close to winning with this pawn formation here, simply cutting black's position in two pieces. So this is much better for us. And after knight f2, a bit better is to play e takes on d4, but we can take with a queen. And after rook e8, bishop e2, bishop a6. We don't really mind to spend the tempo taking on a6 because we are forcing black's knight on the rim. And after castle shot, d4, we can trade queens and take on e4. And it's pretty clear that white has a very nice edge because of this ruined pawn structure on the queen side. And we can play something like knight c3, opening up the rook and directly attacking the a7 pawn. Even knight c5 is also tempting, but yeah, I think white has many ways to get an advantage from here. So this is really nice. And instead of this e5 move, black can also introduce taking on e4 first, and then play for e5. But here, it's really nice to just remember you can take on e5. And despite black being able to take on h3, white has a very nice endgame here because of this key move that is e6. And for example, the point is that if black takes, you can play bishop c4, and white has a very nice pressure on the e6 pawn. We're very likely to win it back and have a very nice position. And if black avoids it by playing knight e5, we can play knight c5, and after knight g6, king e3 is very strong. Pawn takes on e6, but we can just play bishop e2, stopping black's threat of rook f3 that was in the position. And after knight f4, we can just play rook f1, hitting the knight. And after g5, h4 is really nice. We're not worried about any knight g2 stuff, because you can play the strong king d4 move, attacking the knight. Then the g5 pawn will be left under attack. So white has already a much better position. So with that being said, we already covered this b5 move in great depth, and we can now move on a little bit of an inferior line, which is c5, but it's still like can get quite tricky if you don't know how to react against it, because black is trying to open up the position, saying that our f2 f3 move is quite weakening. But here we have a very strong reaction. We can take on d5, and black has two ways of playing this. If takes on d4, we can take with a queen, and after the tricky looking knight c6, obviously we cannot really capture the knight because the queen will drop, but we can go for this bishop b5 move, which is very strong, pinning the knight. Then after pawn takes on d5, we can just take with a queen, and in case of bishop d7, we have this very strong bishop g5 hitting the queen. And after knight f6, we can simply sidestep with queen c4. After a6, we can take on c6. We don't really mind giving up the bishop pair. And after knight g2 a2, rook c8, we can bring our rook with tempo by playing rook d1. And after queen a5, we can just take on f6, play queen g4. And white is simply having a devastating advantage because we are up a pawn and the enemy king is still in the center, not to mention that the c8 rook is now under attack. So white is doing very well here. And if after e d5, black takes with a pawn, we're going to be taking on c5. This is really what you need to remember, and that's the most precise move, creating a direct threat of queen takes on d5. For example, if black takes, we're going to be taking on d5 with a queen, and on queen b6, we have a super strong move, which is to play knight e4, sacrificing the g1 knight, but the main idea is that after bishop takes, we can play knight d6 check, and black doesn't really have a good move, because king e7 runs into knight to c8, which is winning the queen. King f8 allows queen f7 mate, and the other moves, going with the king on a d5, allows knight c4 with a discovery check, and again, we will be winning the queen. So instead of this, if black plays bishop to e7, then we can just go queen b5, getting rid of the queens and keeping up the extra pawn with a much better position. And if after d takes on c5, black goes a little bit more aggressive by playing d4, hitting our knight, then again we can go for quick development with bishop to b5 check, and after knight c6, queen e2 is very precise. And after bishop e6, you can play knight e4, and we already have a threat of knight g5. This is a very common theme when black blocks the check on the e-file with bishop e6, as we've seen a little bit earlier in the course. And after knight f6, we can just go knight g5, as mentioned, and after queen d7, we can trade queens, and after bishop to d2, bishop c5, we can castle long. And even though we are not up material, we can continue with knight e2, rook e1, knight f4 ideas. Black has a lot of weaknesses that we can attack, and this combined with a bishop pair is securing white a very nice advantage. So this is again like already more than you need to know against this c5 move, but I've noticed that it's actually getting played quite regularly in online games. So you just need to know this reaction that against c5, you take on d5 and then you take on c5, and you should be good to go, I think. And with that being said, we can move on to the more timid knight moves, which are knight e7 and knight d7. So if knight e7, my recommendation is something that is playing more in the Lila style with h4. But this move is actually quite logical. If you also have seen my first course on the Sicilian, where in the Rosolimo, when black plays with e6 and knight e7, this is usually like a very common idea, because we're trying to meet black's knight g6 with h5. So this again maybe would have not been so obvious like maybe 5 years ago, but nowadays throwing the h pawn like that is already quite typical and actually very strong. So after h4, black plays knight d7, and now we're going to be playing h5. You can see that this knight is kind of stuck now on e7. So black has to first of all stop us from advancing even more by playing h6, and now we can develop our knight to h3 as we usually do. And here black has a choice between going queen b6 or rerouting the knight with knight to g8. Against knight g8, I like the move queen e2, which is creating a direct threat of ed5, and after cd5, we can take with the knight because the e6 pawn will be pinned. So black has to either take on e4 or play knight f6. If black takes, we're going to be taking with the knight. This is a very strong move here, opening up the position. And after knight f6, we can just play knight f2. And if bishop e7, we can play bishop to d2, preparing to castle long. And after knight takes, knight f6, attacking the d4 pawn, but we can just defend it by playing c3. And after b6, castle long. Knight takes on e4, queen e4. Black can go queen d5, which looks like, it's forcing queens off, but it's not really an issue for us since we can just play bishop to d3. And if black would be taking on e4, we have a very nice advantage after bishop takes. And if black plays bishop to b7, we can even take on d5 ourselves. And after c takes on d5, we can play f4, and followed by g4, g5. White has a very nice initiative on the king side with very easy moves. Just push the g pawn, bring this rook to the g file, and white has a lot of threats. So instead of taking on e4, black would also go for knight f6. But here, as you may have already guessed, we're going to be playing e5. This move is connected with a pawn sack, but it's just a very strong one, because after knight takes on h5, threatening knight g3, we're going to be playing queen f2, making sure that the g3 square is controlled, and now we're also threatening to trap the knight with g4. So black has to create a square on g7, but we can just play g4, knight g7, develop the bishop to e3, preparing to castle long. And after b5, we're not really afraid of any pawn storm on the queen side. We can just play bishop to d3, and after queen b6, you can play knight f4, activating the knight. Already white has some sacrificial ideas with bishop g6 or knight g6. I'm not saying to go immediately for it, but this is just something that you want to be constantly keeping an eye on. And after b4, knight a4 is just a very strong move, attacking the knight and also controlling the key c5 square. And after queen a5, you can just play b3, solidifying the situation on the queen side. And after bishop a6, you can just trade off the bishops and play knight e3. And the way I see this game going, white is going to castle long. We're going to be winning the h6 pawn. And then, we're just going to be constantly pressing because black doesn't really have any counterplay here. So white is much better. And instead of this knight g8 move after knight h3, black would also try to play queen b6, but after knight f2, knight g8, preparing to get the knight to f6, can play g4, bishop e7. But now we can simply go e5, and in case of c5, we can simply take it with the idea that bishop takes on c5 will be met with knight e3, and after bishop d4, attacking our e5 pawn, we can just defend with f4. And now we're threatening a move such as knight e2 to eliminate the bishop, so black has nothing better than spoiling our structure, but still after queen c7, queen d2, we're ready to activate this bishop via a3, and even looking forward to occupy the outpost on d6, which is a very juicy square with a very nice edge for white. So against this knight e7, just remember you're gonna be pushing the h pawn very early, and then black is having quite a hard time in finishing development. So we can move on to the other knight move, which is knight to d7, which in my opinion is actually pretty decent, but it's just not that flexible as the main main line of this video with knight f6 is. So here we're gonna be sticking with the common bishop e3 move, and now black has two main plans to choose from. One of them is to push b5, the other one is to go bishop to b4. In case black starts with b5, we can just play bishop to d3, and after knight b6, threatening to play knight c4, it's really important to just take away the key square from black and play b3. And now the knight on b6 is sort of out of the game. There's no need to be afraid of bishop to b4 pinning our knight, because we can just play knight g to e2, and after pawn takes on e4, we can take on e4, keeping our strong pawn center, and after something like e5, we can set up a really nice trap by playing short castle. Because for example, if black takes the bait and takes on c3 and then takes on d4, we have a very strong queen h5 move, threatening queen takes on f7 mate, and after knight f6 we can play queen e5, and we're ready to pick up the d4 pawn next with a very nice position for white, thanks to the bishop pair. And after castle short, if black does not take on c3 but plays knight f6, we can just go h3, make sure there are not any knight g4 jumps that we have to worry about, and after castle short, we can just play queen e1, preparing to bring our rook into the game with rook d1, and also swing the queen over to the king side with queen h4. Black can play something like bishop to d6, but after rook d1, knight e7, queen h4, we can continue with something like knight g3 to f5, with just a very nice position for white. And instead of b5, black can also try to develop the bishop to b4, but then we have this very strong e5 move, getting to a position that is becoming quite similar to the French defense, but I believe it's an improved version, because this knight is already on d7, as you normally get to see in the French defense. After black plays c5, that knight is always coming to c6, not to d7. This could be quite an important issue for black. And here after e5, c5, we're going to be playing a3, and black can keep the bishop with bishop to a5, but we can just play f4, solidifying our center. After knight e7, knight f3, knight f5, we can just sidestep the attack with bishop f2. After takes on d4, bishop takes on c3, eventually has to be played, spoiling our structure, or we can just take and meet queen c7 with queen d2, and after castle short, bishop d3. Black is dealing with a knight takes on f5 threat, and if, for example, black takes on d4, we would be happy to recapture with the pawn and keep a very nice center. So, yeah, white just has a very easy play with a slightly better position. So, instead of this, what I expect more from black to do is taking on c3 immediately, and after pawn takes on c3, queen a5, hitting our c3 pawn. Here we have to go bishop to d2, defending our pawn, and here black has two moves. Queen a4 would be a very common idea for the French defense, and also knight e7 is a move that black has. But here I really like to play a4, just getting rid of any queen a4 ideas by all means. And after castles, we can continue with f4, preparing to get our knight to f3. So this is really getting very close to mainline French territory, only that we have an improved version. So no need to worry about the theoretical lines or anything like that. Because there are very few games with it, and yeah, it's just an improved version for us. Can play knight f3. After knight b6, we can go bishop d3. Keep in mind that already bishop takes h7 is a massive threat, so black has to do something about it, and usually f5 is the way to deal with this. But we can just take, and after the rook takes castles, knight c4, just occupy the e5 square, and if black takes, we have a very strong way to recapture, which is with a d pawn, attacking the rook, and the idea was that now we can break with c4, and with queen h5 ideas in mind, and the bishop pair, and the position being about to open up, yeah, white is much better because of the bishop pair. So after knight e5, knight takes on d2 is another move that black has, but after queen takes on d2, we have a very nice position with this knight occupying the ideal square, and this bishop being much more active than the other one on c8. So white has a nice position, and after bishop d2, black can also go for queen a4, as I mentioned earlier. But here we're going to be sticking with this typical move for the main lines of the French, which is queen b1. It's really one of my favorite moves because it's threatening bishop b5 ideas. And here black has two ways of playing. One of them is to play c4, simply locking our bishop. But then we can just start by advancing our g-pawn. And the idea is after knight e7 to push h4, and after castle short, white has a very nice move to force the endgame with queen b4, because we are not only attacking the queen, but now also the e7 knight is hanging. So black has to take, but after pawn takes, white just has a very nice endgame, and we can play really push on both sides here. We can advance on the king side, look for something like this to break with f5, and yeah, I mean, there's just could also think about doubling our rooks on the a5 and then eventually break there. So white has a very nice position, and if after queen b1, black plays a6, then we have this typical idea to play queen b3. We really like the endgames when we have the bishop there, and after queen takes, pawn takes, white just has a very nice endgame. We can continue our development with f4 and knight f3, and then we have a choice between opening things up with c4, or also playing for b4 and then a4. So it's really up to you how you want to be playing this position, but white is enjoying quite a nice edge. So yeah, I think this is already it about the knight d7 move. Just play bishop to e3, and then depending on what plan black will pick, then you sort of adjust. So if they play bishop b4, we're transposing to the improved version of the winnower, because the knight on d7 is not ideally placed. And if black plays b5, then we simply play bishop to d3, and we are ready to meet this knight b6 move with b3, and you should be good to go. So with that being said, we can move on to the main knight of this chapter, which is the move knight f6. Okay, so after the move knight f6, what I really like to play, as I said, is the move bishop to e3, because going e5 would be heading towards the main lines, but again, there is no need to learn an additional opening as a bishop d3 French player, which is my main recommendation in this course. So we're going to be sticking with a move bishop to e3. And now, after this, black actually has a number of moves at his disposal, and we're going to be starting with one of the trickiest ones, which is the move queen to b6 here. Simply attacking the b2 pawn, and yeah, after analyzing this position for a while, I decided that rook b1 should be the best move. One of the main ideas is that the problem with a3, which is usually a nice move to make, with the idea that queen takes on b2, will run into knight a4, just to show it on the board. Knight a4, trapping the queen, pretty standard trick. But here, black has a strong reaction with takes and d5, and I couldn't really find anything for it in this position. Therefore, after queen b6, I really like the simple looking rook to b1, and after this, again, black has a choice between taking on e4 or playing c5. Going for c5, it's maybe not the most typical move, but I think could be a playable alternative for black, And anyways, we want to be ready for this kind of reactions where black is trying to strike in the center. So against c5, we can take advantage of the fact that now we can develop our bishop, and we will do so by going for bishop to b5 check. And here black has many ways to block the check. One of them would be to block it with a knight. The other one is to play bishop to d7. If knight c6, we can just continue developing with knight g to e2. And after, for example, d takes on e4, we can take with the f1. And if black goes knight g4, this is usually a common move that black has whenever we play bishop e3. So yeah, we need to be considering this all the time while playing these lines. But we have here the simple and strong bishop to g1. Again, to some players, this might actually look a little bit sketchy because the bishop is blocking this rook into the corner. But actually, white setup is very sound because we can just kick the enemy knight at any point, and then we can move the bishop away and we can castle afterwards. So there is simply nothing to worry about in this position. And if black goes a6, we can simply keep the tension with bishop to a4. And after bishop d7, we're going to do exactly what I said. We're kicking the knight with h3. And after knight f6, we have even another tempy move. We have e5, attacking the knight. And after knight d5, we can trade. And after pawn takes, again, what to do? We want to finish our development. So the bishop on g1 is staying kind of in the way. So therefore, bishop f2 is a very natural and nice move, preparing the short castle onto the next move. And here, I've looked into three major continuations for black. Again, like this is not one of the most theoretical lines, but I just want to make sure that you get a little bit more familiar with how the game could go if black goes for this sidelines connected with knight to f6 and then with this queen b6 move. So again, this is not really something that you need to know by heart. By any means, because this position is very fresh and there are no games with it, but I think it can still give you a nice indication of what the possible plans are. So here, for example, after c takes on d4, we're going to be castling, and if black goes for the greedy knight takes on e5, we can take on d7, and after knight takes on d7, knight takes on d4, we have this super threatening, this super annoying check on e1, and black has to go for long castle, even though, the king cannot really be so safe on that side. But it's much better than staying in the center. So now we can start the initiative with b4. And we're having a very nice initiative on the queen side. We can continue with like a4, a5, and then make sure to play b5. If we go b5 immediately, black will get additional ideas of maybe just moving around our pawn with a5. So maybe just get our pawn to a5 first and then break with b5. And yeah, then just the black king is going to be really, really exposed. So instead of this, black would also play a little bit safer with bishop to e7. But against this, we're simply going to be taking on d4, threatening the super annoying knight takes on c6, creating a discovery attack onto the enemy queen. And black has to sidestep with queen to c7. But now we have this really nice move going for e6. Temporarily sacrificing a pawn, but you will see that white is getting a very nice initiative after pawn takes. We can take on c6, making sure that the d4 knight remains unchallenged for now. And after pawn takes, we have this super important queen h5 check, forcing an additional weakness by black with g6. Then we can retreat all the way to e2, threatening knight takes on e6. So black can try to keep his pawn with e5, but we have again very strong move, bishop g3. Again, we're going a little bit deeper with the line, but I think this is a nice line to see, so you can get more familiar with this type of positions. I'm not necessarily saying that this is how all the games will go, but I think it's a nice little idea to have in mind, this kind of e6 idea to sacrifice the pawn. And then we also have still some nice attacking moves, as you will see. As for example, after bishop d6, we have rook f6, threatening to take on d6, and then we have bishop takes on e5 ideas. And after the rook f8, it's best to just bring the other rook. Black should castle. It's simply the best move. And now we have the surprising rook takes on d6. We're not going to be taking on a6 with check. Have even a better move. And after rook takes, queen takes, queen d6, can take on a6 finally, and after king c7, we go check, king c8, knight b3, threatening knight c5, with a very unpleasant initiative for white. And I know we've gone really, really deep with this variation, as deep as move 29, but I think this is still like quite nice to know, especially this e6 motive that we have. So instead of cd4, black would also go queen a5. It looks like it's winning the bishop, but we can simply defend it with c3. Now you can see that the queen is nicely defending it. And after this trick with knight takes on e5, this is really possible, but it's not really a problem since we can just take. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that we need to be expecting our opponent to take on e5. This was not just a simple blunder. Like, white did not miss black has this move. It's also possible a few moves back, but we will come back to that. So after castles, c4, you can play knight f4, which is already threatening rook to e1. So again, black's king is really, really shaky. So again, probably long castle is already called for, but now we can just push b4. And yeah, if the queen moves away, then the d5 pawn will be hanging. Therefore, after cb3, queen b3, white has a very nice initiative onto the b file. Plus also the d5 pawn is under attack. So white is much better. And instead of queen a5 check, black can also go for knight takes on e5 immediately. This is the best sort of try for black. But we have a strong move, knight c3, defending our bishop and keeping the knight under attack on e5. And now the line could go something like bishop takes on a4, knight takes, and after queen a5, we can just defend our knight with c3, and if cd4. We have this really nice castle. This is quite a nice motive that we have. We also have seen it in the French couple of times, where we prioritize development over recapturing in the center, because we can simply focus on to the fact that the enemy king is still under potential trouble. So after bishop d6, you can take on d4, attacking the knight, and now play knight c5, threatening to take on b7, and yeah, we can even support the knight with b4. So yeah, white has very nice compensation here, based also on rook to e1 ideas. So this should pretty much cover everything that you need to know against this knight g4 move. And other than that, black can play c takes on d4, but here it's really, really strong based on a correspondence game to take on d4 with a queen. And now white is getting really, really nice endgames. So for example, after queen takes, knight takes, bishop d7, we can take on c6 twice. And after pawn takes, we can just play king to e2, and our king is really powerful in this endgame. As for example, after bishop b4, we're going to be defending the e4 pawn with king f3, because bishop takes on c3 was a threat. And for example, if black goes for the this sort of rushed version of bishop takes on c3, we get to activate our rook with rook b7, and white is much better, can bring the other rook, and black is struggling to defend his weaknesses. And if black plays short castle instead of taking on c3, we're going to be bringing the rook, and we can play something like knight a4, and then consider to reroute the knight to c4. This is one of the possible plans. But anyways, I feel like white has more than one move to keep the advantage here. So yeah, this is really, really nice stuff if we are getting into this endgames. And this should cover this d takes on e4 move. So the other one that is left for black to play here is a6. And now we have nothing better than taking on c6. And for example, if black takes with a pawn on c6, we can play knight a4, attacking the queen and the c5 pawn. Black has to go for a queen a5 check, but now we are going to be playing this strong move, bringing the other knight to c3. This looks a little bit clumsy for the moment, but you will see that we are getting actually very nice control over the dark squares on the queen side. So for example, after cd4, we can take with the bishop, and yeah, black is not really in time with c5 because we're threatening to take on f6. So black has a choice between queen c7 or rook to b8. If queen c7, also keep in mind that bishop b6 could be potentially very annoying. So just keep an eye on that, because the queen might get trapped. And Queen c7, we can play queen e2, which is threatening to take on f6 and then take twice on d5 because the e pawn will be pinned. So black has to either play the sophisticated a5 or the safer bishop e7. If bishop e7, we can castle, and after castle shot, bishop b6 is strong, attacking the enemy queen. And after queen b8, we have this strong positional move, trading off the dark square bishops, so we will have complete supremacy on the queen side. And after bishop takes, knight takes, queen a7. We're gonna bring the other knight on the rim. I know this looks a little bit weird, but just keep in mind that this knight is really gonna be dominating this bishop here. So we are allowed to do that. And after knight e7, we can just play queen f2, defending the knight. And after knight takes, we can take with a queen. And we have a very typical scenario with good knight against bad bishop, where white is playing for a win without any risks, so to speak. So white has a very nice endgame. And instead of bishop e7, if your opponent is playing like a computer and goes a5 with a threat of playing bishop to a6, then you can play knight to b6, attacking the rook. And after rook b8, we can eliminate the bishop because the threat of bishop a6 was really annoying. And after rook takes, we can take on d5, pawn takes on d5. And now we're going to be taking on f6. As I said, the big point is to take on d5 because the pawn is pinned. So knight takes d5. This is happening. But black has this queen takes on c2 in reserve. And although after knight f6, the computers are evaluating this position after queen takes on e2, king takes on e2, the engine thinks that black has some defensive resources. I still feel like white has a very decent chances to win the game here, being up a pawn. I mean, now that I look more from a human perspective, I would definitely feel much more comfortable playing this position as white. So, yeah, anyways, there's no way we can ever lose this, and we are up a pawn. So, this is pretty much it about queen c7. Another move to deal with our bishop b6 threat is to play rook to b8. And here we're going to be castling short. And after bishop to e7, a3 is a very nice move, introducing b4 ideas to hit the queen and also control the c5 square, especially, the c5 square, but the b6 square is also quite important. And, for example, c5 in this position would be way too loose because we can play bishop e5, and after rook a8, we are simply winning the d5 pawn, and white is just much better. And if after a3, black plays short castle, we can play bishop e5 first, hitting the rook, and then once the rook moves, then we can go b4, hitting the queen. After queen d8, we have a super nice move. We can play queen d4, and just look at how nicely white is covering all the dark squares. Look at the c8 bishop, which is really passive. So yeah, I really like how the opening came out here, and white has a very nice edge. So instead of this taking on c6 with a pawn, which, might seem quite natural because you want to take from the side, but there's nothing wrong actually with taking with a queen as well. And we're going to be covering it right now. So if queen takes, we're going to be taking on d5. And if black takes on d5 with a pawn, we're going to be heading for the isolated queen's pawns positions by taking on c5 twice and then playing queen d4. This is a really nice move because we are not only developing the queen, but we are also doing it with tempo, and we are seeking for this queen trade while also activating our knight. Because if black takes on d4, we'll take with the knight, and our knight will be much happier than it was on e2. So white is slightly better here without much risks. And if after he takes on d5, black takes with a knight, we can take on d5. And for example, here queen takes d5 is already quite a bad move in view of d takes on c5. The main issue being that bishop takes c5 will no longer be possible because we can trade the queens first, and then the bishop will drop. And if after knight takes on d5, black takes on d5 with the pawn, we can again just go for the same thing, trade on c5 twice. And here, instead of queen d4, which would be blundering the c2 pawn, we can start with c3 with the idea to play either queen d4 or knight d4 next. It's really nice for us. Bishop f5 can be played hitting the rook, but we can just move it with rook c1 and after castles. I really like knight d4 this time because we can mid rook e8 with king f2, and our king is really safe. We can bring the rook onto the e-file, and yeah, white just has long-term advantage here, pressing against the IQP. So that's pretty much it about this bishop b5, knight c6 line. And now we can move on to what happens if black decides to block the check with a bishop. Here we can trade the bishops and then just take on d5, pawn takes on d5. And now we're just going to play the simple developing move with knight g2, e2. Black has a choice between going either bishop d6 or c4. If c4, we have a very nice way of activating our rook by pushing b3, creating a threat of taking on c4. And after c takes on b3, we can take with the rook, gaining a tempo against the enemy queen, and also activating the rook in the same time. After queen c6, knight g3 is quite strong, creating a threat of going knight f5, and after g6, queen e2 is again very nice move, threatening some unpleasant discovery, and if bishop e7, bishop h6, black is really in some trouble here, because the king is caught in the center. And this is really nice for us. Instead of c4, black can go for bishop d6, as I said, but here we can simply castle, and after castle shot by black, we can just transpose to this isolated queen's pawn position, and after queen d4, we're eliminating all the potential discoveries, plus, yeah, we're just solidifying our position. We can continue with like rook d1, knight f4, put pressure on the d5 pawn, with a small but steady advantage. So, yeah, I think that should be pretty much it about this c5 move, if black tries to open up the position this early in the game. Other than c5, taking on e4 is the other alternative, connected with the idea that after pawn takes, black plays e5, and this can be met with knight f3, and after the move knight b2 d7, we can play bishop to e2, bishop e7 or knight g4. If knight g4, we can just play bishop g1, we can kick the enemy knight with h3, and then just go back bishop e3. So this doesn't really have a lot of independent value. And if after bishop e2, black goes bishop e7, we can play h3, avoid knight to g4. It would be bad to castle and allow knight g4, because now we can no longer retreat to g1, because the king is there. So we must be careful here, play h3. And after castle shot, we can castle ourselves. And after e4, taking with the knight is very strong, with the idea that after knight e5, we're not going to go for the immediate discovery with knight f5, because black will have bishop c5, but we will instead play king h1 in the first place, just sidestepping in the diagonal. And now the trick is that after knight f5, bishop c5, we will have knight a4, hitting both pieces, and without allowing bishop takes on e3 with check. So this is already setting up quite a nice trap. So black has to sidestep with queen c7, but we can just play queen e1. And we have a sort of a double-edged position where we have this isolated pawn, but I feel like white has very good dynamic play based on knight f5 ideas. We can bring the queen to g3, bishop h6 ideas, and it just feels like a little bit easier to play as white. So after knight f3, black can also just go straight for the endgame by taking on d4, and we are going to be taking with the queen on d4. We don't want to avoid the endgame. This is really what we like about this line, because if black takes on d4, this is actually very risky, because white has the nice lead in development, and I will try to show why in the upcoming lines. Because after bishop takes on d4, black kind of has to play bishop e6 already, because bishop e7 would allow a very good version for white. After bishop c4, activating the bishop, and now e5 is very annoying, kicking the enemy knight away, and after knight e8, we can just activate our knight with knight to e4, and yeah, I mean, just look at white's minor pieces. We have so much activity, and such a nice space advantage, so white has a very nice edge. And coming back to what's best for black here, the move bishop e6, stopping us from developing to c4, But this has another downside, and that is the move knight to g5, because we are threatening to take on e6, and then we can attack that target with the bishop. Black doesn't have anything better than playing knight b to d7, and now we can take on e6. And here it's really important to not allow black to push e5. So therefore, the way to do so is by pushing e5 ourselves. So after e5, black can either go into the center, and after something like knight d5, cd5 can be met by c3, and white has a nice edge thanks to the bishop pair. Black can play something like bishop c5, but we will still keep a nice edge after something like bishop d3. And if black ever decides to trade on d4 and improve our pawn structure, we will have small but steady pressure, both on the c file and potentially also by pushing our pawns on this side of the board with something like h4. So after knight takes on d5, taking with the e pawn is also playable for black, but we're just gonna push b4 now, stop any c5 ideas that black had. And yeah, I still like this position for white because we're having the bishop pair. You can play something like bishop d3, castle short next. You can even keep the king in the center, but castling would be a little bit safer. So white has a nice position. And after e5, knight g4 is the other move that black has, targeting the e5 pawn. But here, I really like white's play after bishop c4, setting up a trap because knight g takes on e5. Would not be so great for black because we can take on e6, and after bishop c5 we have this really strong move which is rook to d1, and after bishop takes, rook takes, knight c5, attacking our bishop, but we can simply retreat it all the way to h3, and now white has very nice pressure in the long run with bishop against knight. So I feel like these endgames are really something that we can grind in a long game. So instead of this, black has a little bit of a better move, which is bishop to c5, swapping the bishop pair. Here we have nothing better than trading, and now we have to get rid of the defender of e6 by pushing b4. And after knight takes on e5, b takes on c5, knight c4. This is the best line for black. We can take on b7. And despite the material equality, I still feel like white should be slightly better here. Because of the super active rook, even though the position should be pretty close to equal, I just feel like white has the easier game overall. So if after queen takes on d4, black does not take immediately and plays the move knight b to d7, this is what they played in correspondence chess. We have a very nice idea here. Because you have to keep in mind that the idea behind this move is that black is trying to play bishop c5. And if black gets in bishop c5, that could actually just lead to an immediate loss, because the bishop will be hanging there. But obviously, now that we understand what is black's point, we're not going to allow it. And we're going to do that by pushing b4. And this is a very nice prophylactic move. And here, for example, black, the main line goes something like knight g4. We can take on b6, and after pawn takes, we can go bishop d4, activating our bishop to the max, and after something like b5. This is usually played also to stop some bishop c4 ideas, or simply to make sure that the b pawn will no longer be under attack. So b5 can play h3. Knight has to go back to h6, unfortunately, because after knight f6, e5 was quite unpleasant. But now we can play bishop d3. Black goes f6, with the idea to play for a solid setup with knight f7 and then knight e5. But we are in time to open up the position here with e5. After pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes. I feel like white is a little bit better with a more active pieces. Just keep in mind that it's going to be really tough for black to develop this bishop because the g7 pawn will be hanging constantly. So even though the game ended in a draw here in correspondence, the game later ended in a draw, not in this position. But yeah, I still feel like it will be quite tough for black to defend this in a practical game. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it about this this line connected with early queen d6. So we can move on and check some of the alternatives. Just keep in mind to play rook b1 versus queen b6, and if they go c5, we go bishop b5 check, and then I think you're good to go. And in case of d4, fe4, e5, just remember that we really like to play this kind of endgames and make sure to not blunder knight bd7, bishop c5, just play b4, and again, I think you're pretty much good to go. And with that being said, we can move on to the next line, which is after bishop e3. So instead of queen b6, black can also try to play the move bishop to e7 here, but we can just play the move queen d2, which is a multi-purpose move. It's sort of flexible, keeping ideas of long castle available. But as you will see, if if black goes for short castle, there's no need to rush with picking your side. We can just start by playing bishop to d3. And again, like we could still play like e5 followed by f4 and transpose to the main lines of the French, but that's not really what we're looking for. So therefore, bishop d3 is the way to go. And here black has a pretty wide choice between c5, knight d7, and b6. We're going to be starting with c5, where we actually are going to play e5 now. And after knight fd7, we're going to be playing f4. I know I said we're not going to be going for the main lines of the French, but here we're getting something that is actually similar to the main lines, but it's not really the case because we don't get any transposition. So here black can either go c4 or take on d4. c4, I think it's slightly dubious for many reasons. The obvious one is that black is not keeping the tension in the center, and this will give us a free hand on the king side. So after the c4, we can just play bishop e2, and after knight e6, knight f3, rook b8, we can castle, black plays b5, but black is not really going very far with that attack, since we can just play knight d1, and after b4, we can just play queen e1. We can, we're going to meet c3 with like d3. We're going to ignore everything on that side, and our main focus will be to play like king h1, g4, f5, play rook g1 if needed, or maybe even queen g3. With just a very nice attack overall on the king side. So this c4 move is really quite a common move for lower rated players, that they just see this kind of move that is gaining a tempo. And this is actually like one of the first lessons that you get in chess, to play aggressive moves, and whenever you gain a tempo is a good idea. And generally this is the case, but in these particular situations you have to be able to make the difference and understand that a move such as c4 looks good, in the first place, but then it actually kind of ruins the potential for the rest of the game. So c4, not a great move here. And in general, in this type of positions, so black needs to take on d4 so that the position can remain a little bit more complicated. We're going to be taking with a bishop, and after knight c6, of course, we're going to be keeping the bishop on the board with bishop to f2. After knight c5, we can no longer save this d3 bishop, but this is actually quite a common theme for the French. We can just play knight f3, and after knight takes on d3, taking with a pawn could be interesting. In this particular position, I think the issue is d4 followed by bishop b4. So yeah, but generally taking with a pawn is interesting, just that it's not so great here. It doesn't mean, it's not like a common idea. Usually, like, let's make a mental exercise and suppose castle was on the board. Then taking on d3 is sometimes interesting, with the idea to bring this knight over to e2 and then d4, and just use that square for the knight. This is common in the French. Like I can really recall like a lot of endgames where the king just comes to f2, e3, and then d4, like the old Steinitz games. But yeah, I think this is already more than enough that you need to know about the structure. Since we're not really focusing on the main lines of the French for the series. So taking on d3 with the queen is the way to go here. And after bishop d7, castles. Rook c8. I really like a3, avoiding any potential knight before jumps. And black usually breaks with f6, because there's not really much else to do. And after taking on f6, bishop takes. Rook e1, we get a pretty unclear position, where I feel like white has the easier game, because we kind of control these squares that are d4 and d5, and the enemy bishop is quite passive on d7. But I really want to show you a way that black can go wrong very quickly, which is taking on c3, because here white has the surprising intermezzo with knight g5, threatening to checkmate on h7, and after g6 we can recapture on c3. Black is left with the hanging pawn on e6, and also with the weakened dark squares. So white is already clearly better here. And with that being said, we can cover what happens after bishop d3. And if black plays knight b to d7, well, this is going to be quite a dubious move for him, because we can just play e5, grab a tempo, and the goal of showing this line is more to show what is white's dream setup. Not really that important from a theoretical point of view, but the idea is to play a knight c e2, with the point being that we want to be able to meet c5 with c3, and we keep this super nice pawn structure here, as you've seen it quite a number of times by now in this course. And after b6, we can play f4, making room for the knight, bishop b7, knight f3, with a very nice position for white. Just keep in mind that you can always consider ideas such as h4 and then taking on h7. Not really working in this particular position, but also just going for short castle and then g4 with f5 is also a very sound plan. Keep in mind that the knight is also coming on f4 once we push f5. So this is very nice for white. b6 is another move for black, preparing to play bishop a6. But again, we can just play e5 and meet knight fd7 with knight c2, preparing to push c3 and keep the very nice center. Black can go bishop a6, but we don't really mind trading the bishops all that much, since after c5, c3, knight c6, knight f3, we still keep a very nice space advantage, and black can either take on d4 or play c4. If c4, we can just go queen d2, and after b5, I really like to go f5, with the main idea that if pawn takes, we can go queen c2, and black doesn't really have a good way to defend the f5 pawn, since g6 will allow us to push h4, and we're looking forward to go h5 on the next move, and then open up the h5 for our rook. If black plays h5 himself, we already have ideas of playing knight f4, hitting the d5 pawn, and we also have knight takes on h5 ideas, because then the f5 pawn will drop. This is not necessarily a forced line, but it's really something that you want to keep an eye on. So, the knight c6, knight f3, taking on d4 is also a move. We're going to be taking with a pawn, of course, avoiding any knight c5 getting to e4. Like, for example, you never want to allow such things, like knight c5 getting to e4. And after pawn takes knight b4, we can just play queen e2, and rook c8 is not really that scary, since we can just block the c file and defend against the knight c2 threat by playing knight c3, and after knight c6, we can just castle, and white has a very nice position with the extra space. Again, we might even be able to play f5 on the next move, because he takes on f5, drops the d5 pawn, so white has a very nice position. And with that being said, I think we can actually move on to the ultimate main line, which is after bishop to e3, to play the move bishop to b4 in this particular position. And we're going to be meeting that by going e5 first, attacking the enemy knight. And after knight f to d7, we're going to be playing a3, questioning the bishop. And black has two big moves here. One of them is, the main one is to take on c3, but they can also play bishop a5, which, this is usually something that we should also consider while playing a3. But after bishop a5, you simply need to remember that b4 is strong, and after bishop c7, we can play f4. And black doesn't really have all that much counterplay, since after a5, we can play knight f3, and the trades along the a file are in our favor, because after castles, bishop d3, knight a6, attacking the b4 pawn, we can just play queen b1, defending our pawn, and after queen e7, we can just defend our b4 pawn once again with knight e2, and after f5, we can just defend everything with c3. And white has many plans here at his disposal, like bishop f2 to h4 is one of them, castling short, and then playing king h1, rook g1, followed by g4. I mean, maybe even playing like rook g1, g4 immediately could be a thing. I just, sorry for the confusion here, I just draw way too many arrows. But rook g1 and g4 could be another plan that you can go for. I mean, g4 immediately could also be an idea, because pawn takes allows bishop takes on h7. Basically, white just has a very nice decision to make here. And also, this knight could potentially be rerouted to b3 and so on. And yeah, white is just much better here. So after a3, it is way more critical to take on c3. But we're going to take with a b pawn, and black can either strike in the center with c5 or play b6 with the idea to trade the bad bishop. But here f4 is very nice, and after bishop a6, you can just play queen g4, attacking the g7 pawn. And after g6, bishop d3 is very strong, with the idea that c5 can be met by queen d1. The queen has done her job on the queen side, on the king side, by forcing this weakness, and therefore now we're preparing to play knight f3 without wasting any time with the queen over there. Plus we also want to push with g4 and f5, so the queen was staying in the way. And after cd4, we can take with a pawn, queen c8, knight f3, knight goes to c6, castle short. And after knight e7, I really like this a4 move because it's preparing to read out this bishop all the way to a3. This is really one of my favorite maneuvers in this win-aware structure. And after bishop c4, bishop c1 is very strong, and white went on to win in Savchenko against Ilin in Cheboksary. I shouldn't really go ahead with this Russian names, but that is the game that you need to check from this position if you're interested in more details. So bishop a3 is coming next, and yeah, just so many weak squares in black's camp that we're going to be controlling. So this is very nice for white. And in case black plays the immediate c5, we can play f4, preparing to develop our knight to the natural f3 square. And in case of queen a5, we can just play bishop d2. And after queen a4, you already know that the typical idea is to play queen b1, preparing to play bishop to b5. So if black plays c4, stopping our move, here it's actually very strong to play g4. This is a little bit computerish. I have to say that this is not so common, but it's actually very strong in this particular position. Because first thing that comes to mind here is what happens if black goes for the undermining move, which is h5. Well, f5 is then very strong. Because if pawn takes, take on e6, and after pawn takes, knight e2, you can just play rook g1, take on g4, and black's king side has just collapsed. The king side is wide open. We're just going to be collecting a lot of stuff over the g file. So instead of that, after g4, knight c6 would be better, but we can just play knight e2, and after knight e7, knight g3, preparing to play f5. Black can try to stop it with g6, but then we can just go h4 with h5 idea, threatening to take on g6. White is just in very good shape with a pretty nice advantage already. So after f4, the only thing that we are left with is the natural knight c6, and here I really like to start by playing a4 because we're mainly playing against the previous idea that black had with queen a5 and queen a4, but now there's no longer possible because the pawn is already there. So after castle short, knight f3, b6, I really like going bishop d3, setting up a nice trap. If black plays bishop b7, you can just take on h7, and after king takes, we're going knight g5. If king h6, queen g4 just wins, with the idea to play queen h4, followed by queen h7 mate. If black plays king g8, just go queen h5, with mate soon. If rook e8, we can take on f7, and then bring our rook over with checkmate attack. And yeah, there are obviously many ways to win this. I think actually the easiest one would be to go back and collect g7. So really many ways to win this. And after knight g5, king g6, g4 is again very strong, threatening to push f5. And if black plays f5 himself, can just take on f5, play rook g1, and the enemy king is just way too weak. So instead of this, black would always play h6, avoiding the Greek gift. But here we have a very strong move. We can play g4, and with the idea to push g5 next. And you can see that here it's quite nice that we haven't castled just yet, because we could use the g5 for our rook with a very nice attacking position for white overall. So yeah, with that being said, we just finished covering the sidelines that black has in this e6 variation. This is pretty much all that black has at his disposal, other than the bishop b4 move. As I said, knight f6 is really the move that requires the most knowledge. In particular, this line with bishop e3, queen b6. This is something that I would be really trying to focus on this line if going into this chapter, because it's a little bit more concrete. Like if you just got the big ideas of how to play the win-hour structure, in the French, the winnower structure. Again, in case you are not very familiar with it, is the one that we've just seen. If you're like familiar to how the pieces go in this structure, we play like f4, knight f3. If given the chance, we like reroute this bishop to a3. If you're familiar with these positions, again, you don't really need that much theory in order to play well. But yeah, I would be a little bit concerned about this queen b6 move. I would actually just hop into the move trainer and make sure that I have everything under control after rook b1. Just remember that c5 is met with bishop b5, and also that d4 followed by e5. We can simply meet knight b to d7 with b4, and yeah, as long as you follow my recommendation, you should be good to go. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Take care.